Okay, guys, today we are interviewing the author of Fail to Win. Her name is Triffany Hammond. Am I correct?
Triffany. It's just like Tiffany with an R.
Triffany, right. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
You are a certified life coach, international speaker, author. Of course, your current book that I read is really good. And you're also on TED Talks. Today I will be talking about how you were inspired by your mother. Am I correct? Why were you inspired by your mother?
Well, it's interesting, when we talk about inspirations and who inspired us, yes, there's always the person and there's always this other context, right? It's not just about that specific person. It's about the experience they've given us and what we've done with that experience. And yes, my mother's absolutely inspirational. She is one of the strongest women you'll ever meet, having overcome some of the most crazy obstacles in her life, not the least of which was having married my father, who was, a criminal, a murderer, a gun trafficker, not a good man, overcoming her own addictions and really coming to this place where she could do a lot of the work that I talk about in my book and in my program called Fail to Win, where you really start going from what we're taught culturally, which is to manhandle our circumstances, manhandle our relationships, make it happen, right? And really turn that attention back around into that inner life, that piece of you inside that says, am I whole? Am I complete? Am I healed? And if I'm those things, am I happy? Am I bringing myself to be of service? And I've watched her go through that. So that's the person. That context, though, is what is so important. And that is what has really shaped me in the work that I've done. And that context is the representation of shadow and light in the way that I was raised. Because remember, I said, she's overcome some bad things. I was a part of some of those bad things, right? When she was sober, she loved me. I was a gift. I was a treasure. I was talented. I was so smart. All the things that you want your mother to say to you, right? And when she wasn't, I was a drudge on her. I was a burden. I was a mistake. And I was not the best influence in her life, and I saw that the fact of the matter was, yes, her state of mind was different in those two different places. That didn't negate the truth that was held in both of those statements. Children are a blessing, of course, and there are also some of the hardest things to bring into this world and try to guide into something that is wholesome and productive in society. So the truth that we have things in our life that are both shadow and light was inescapable for me. So if that's true, if we hold in our hearts love and fear simultaneously in the same space, maybe, a variance in the spectrum, but simultaneously in the same space, then what does that mean for how we make the choice about who we are and who we bring to the world? So that was a long answer to a short question, but I really wanted to drive home the fact that when we talk about inspirations, we are giving those people its meaning. We are deriving through our choices what we've made that person and the circumstances that brought that person into our lives. We give that meaning. Does that make sense?
Yes, that actually absolutely makes sense. I want to drive home, since it's not actually in the question, but actually, can you explain it in deeper part about the shadow and the light? For the audience to understand how we actually deal with the shadow and the light.
Absolutely, and I'm really glad you had me clarify. Thank you, because this is actually one of the 4 modules in my program, which is now the book that you've mentioned and you've read. It's in the all section, and it all exists in us at the same time. So we have this cultural idea that things, they fit into one box or another. It's completely bifurcated view, right? It's right or it's wrong, it's black or it's white, it's good or it's bad. And we have completely lost sight of the fact that even if something is uncomfortable, it doesn't mean it isn't serving our highest good. It doesn't mean it isn't teaching a lesson. It doesn't mean that we can't mold it and shape it to be something that's useful for us, right? If we put it in the box, Just because it's an uncomfortable experience of being bad, if we put it in that box, we've missed the opportunity to dissect it for its usefulness, right? So when we start thinking about shadow and light, good, bad, right, wrong, if we start thinking of it rather than being it's in this box or it's in this box, right? Rather than just one or the other, if we start thinking of it as being on a spectrum, and that spectrum exists in us at all times. So if we're saying this is a bad experience, this is a, getting laid off is bad. Okay. It's uncomfortable. It's scary. It tests the boundaries of your faith, your skill, your ability to show up as an expert in your field. It challenges all of that. And not but, and it's also an opportunity to get out of a company that maybe is facing financial trouble. It's an opportunity to maybe to look at yourself in a new light and see what else you bring to the table now that you've had that job for a while. It's an opportunity for reinvention, right? And when you can flip that switch, it stops being bad. It stops being something that we don't want, because now we begin to see that it actually feeds us. It actually helps us. And we can balance that shadow and light. We can see that those two things rely on one another to exist. Now we get a choice, right? Now, yeah, did we choose to get laid off? No, absolutely not. It's not fun. We choose, however, our viewpoints on that painful moment. And we must accept that shadow and light within ourselves before, and in the circumstances and in others, before we're empowered with the choice of how we approach the uncomfortable experiences in our life.
Right, because so many of us misunderstand about the shadow and light, and so have I, because there's the mainstream of the whole repressing the shadow instead of letting it actually merge, right? Is it actually merging, right? Or
Yes.
letting it balance? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And I like the idea of merge. It gives you that picture of how the two start to work together. They start to meld together. And the more you can see that gray space in between, the more you have power to define whether or not this experience is going to be useful for you. And that's super important. We're giving away our power every time we say this shouldn't happen. This is wrong. This is bad. We're giving away our power to a circumstance or to a person that we don't have any control over, right? The only thing we have any control over is right here at any given moment. And the moment we start saying this shouldn't have happened to me is the moment that we start depleting ourselves of any modicum of control that we have in the first place.
Right. And in finding, you're actually a very courageous woman because you've been in through a tough situation before. You had a what was it? You had a West Nile virus, right?
Yeah, I did. It was West Nile that turned into full-blown meningitis. I was hospitalized with that. Yep, nearly died. Which I know, and see, here's the thing. Here's the opportunity in there, right? Because we can talk about that as though it was a bad and scary thing. And was it? Absolutely was bad and scary. My children were terrified. My husband at the time was terrified. Yes, it's not fun. I wouldn't wish it on a snake. It was the most pain I've ever experienced in my entire life. And I've given birth naturally twice. And that was still more painful than anything I had experienced. And our reaction to that is to go, oh my gosh, poor you. And again, when we start talking about the choices we have, knowing that in that moment it was hard, knowing that the repercussions of that were an autoimmune disorder that started to shut down my organs. I was slowly dying, and the insomnia and the depression, and knowing how hard all of that was, I can, and it took me a while because I was just in it, right? We know the value of retrospect. I could go back in retrospect and I could see the value of that life experience was to help me understand the choices I had made up until that point had all been external. They were all that I was buying into that bifurcated view. It was either good or it was bad. I had stopped my meditation practices and my journaling. I had a completely different kind of group of friends. They weren't feeding my soul. They weren't feeding me emotionally. It was a completely different life that I was giving all the time outwardly without understanding that I had given up everything that was feeding me on the inside. And you get that sick and everything stops. You don't have anything left except to feed yourself. You don't have anything left except self-care. That had to come first. And I really needed to understand the importance of that nurturing of my inner life. My outer life was good. We got that. Our culture supports that. Our capitalism supports that. Everything we need to manhandle our outside life is there. We are missing the tools that help us nurture and foster what we need in our inner life. And if I hadn't had that experience, I may have for the rest of my life felt like a victim to my circumstances. I may have completely lost who I really was on the inside, believing that, boy, I had hit success. You know, I had hit my arrival point. And if I had lost those, Johnny, there's no way I would have gotten to the point where I could have been of service in this way to other people who are going through tough transitions in their life.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Yes. Thank you for having the courage to do what you do, because in your book you have written your book Fail to Win, right? Okay, I have read your book. You have actually you have it. Well, it's not in print yet, right? But it's going to be, right?
Close. I've got the proof. Got it from the printers. So yes, it is actually like my name on a book. Look, my picture's right there. This is super exciting for me. This is my second book, but it's my first one to do on my own. And this comes from my program. So we're at a situation now where I'm going to review this and make sure that it printed out properly. And once I say okay to the printer, then I will be able to have a full release of this August 1st. And then in the Denver area, I'll be throwing a book launch party August 24th. So this is a really big deal for me. This is everything that you would pay for in my Fail to Win course is in this book. And the reason I wanted to do it in that way was because not everybody can dedicate 12 weeks, right? Not everybody wants to at least start this process in a public way with other students. And not everybody can afford to make that personal investment right out of the gate without knowing what they're getting into. So this is going to be a really great, easy access for anybody who is on the fence about what it takes to do the personal work to choose happiness, to choose fulfillment, to choose peace. That doesn't happen without some conscious effort. And it's all of those tools in this book, almost available for everybody out there. We're so close, and I'm super excited about it.
And I'm happy for you. It's really the book, and it's actually you looking good, and you did a great job. I give you applause for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Can you tell me why you created this book? Even if I have listened. You said all the you instilled the program right inside the book, right? And why did you write this book?
When I started my coaching practice, I started to hear myself say a lot of the same things to pretty much everybody with whom I was working, simply because human problems are human problems. You know, the inner angst and the way that we view our thoughts about a problem as the problem, that is something that has required a lot of work for people, regardless of their problem being laid off, divorce, leaving or entering the workforce, major moves, death, illness, right? Whatever the situation was, I was saying a lot of the same things over and over again and teaching a lot of the same tools over and over again. So I got on my elliptical one night and I put my computer up there and I'm typing away, sweating like a pig. Going, I gotta get this, I gotta put some organization in this. This has to be a book. And I said a phrase as I was just typing away, stream of consciousness coming out. I said a phrase in there about this idea of failure culturally being something we try to avoid. You said it earlier in the interview. We try to get rid of the bad. We try to avoid the bad. We try to make sure that we don't do bad, right? And I was talking about this idea that if we cannot embrace that, we cannot give ourselves a platform for growth and learning. And I said, we must be willing to fail to win. And I went, oh, that should be its own chapter. So I started writing its own chapter. And the more detailed I got in there, the more I realized that's not a chapter, that's its own book. And before I even wrote the book, what I wanted to do was make sure these concepts rang true for people. I wanted to make sure that the tools I was teaching, people could fit into their lives right now, right where they are. Because here's what people do, and you are a self-help expert, and you talk to everybody, you've got all of the influences, so you know this is what happens. People go, yeah, my life is too crazy right now. I'll work on myself at some point, right? They might buy the book and put it on the shelf, or they might buy, learn the tools or read the book and then they forget about them, because the mindset is, if I'm going to do that stuff, it has to come at the right time. So I really wanted to make sure that what I was writing about and the tools that I was giving people to use was easy to digest, easy to remember, and easy to implement right there in the midst of their own chaos. So what I did is I got some people together and I said, hey, let me teach you some tools. You can give me some feedback. Let me know how it goes. I actually ended up creating this rough draft for a book that became a beta course, that became a course. And then I went backward and made that course back into that book. So that's why that's where that came from, and that's why it's taken the path that it has. But the great thing about it is when you get this book, it's all been tested. It isn't something that I just went, hey, I have some cool ideas. I hope you think they're cool too. These are things that people are using in their lives to transform not just their outlook, but because they can transform how they're showing up in the world, of course, everything else in their life is transforming as well.
Right. Yeah. The way you explain it, you're very into how, when I was watching your video, when you talk, you have this energy about you, and you have this amazing personality. I really like that. It shows that, even though I can't usually, I don't know about you, but I can feel usually when I'm near a person, I don't know about the laptop or what we're doing. I can usually tell a person, is it they're really bad, or I'm talking about the good vibe, the bad.
The mojo.
But that's off topic. But so speaking of winning to fail, and you said all these things are correct, but I feel like in society or in school, how most people are afraid to fail, and they want it to be like perfect, but not always. Like they try to overanalyze. How can we get past the fear that we have?
Well, a lot of it, the biggest practice we can do right now is to get super, super present. Because if you think about where that fear comes from, it very rarely comes from the moment that we're in, right? You're talking about in school where the pressure is incredible. You are supposed to know what you're going to do with your life. You are supposed to get the perfect grades, and anything you do, personally is going to end up on your permanent record, and all of the institution that is pushing this path of education, it's telling us not to stay present. It's saying, Don't screw up now because it's going to mess up your future, right? And so our brain goes to the future. If I do this, then this, and this is going to fail, and I'm going to end up in a bad school, or I'm not going to go to school, and then I'm not going to get a good job, and the talk gets faster, and it gets louder, and it starts to overshadow absolutely everything that's sitting right in front of you at this moment. The best way we can stop the fear is to make sure we are right here, right now, and not borrowing trouble from the future. We have no idea how things are going to pan out. And you live long enough and you start looking back, and you can't believe how many times you go, if I would have known this would have turned out okay, I would not have beat myself up. I would not have been afraid. That happens over and over again. And if we can stop listening to this cultural idea that we have to know how our journey is going to end in order to take the journey. If we can stop buying into that, then we can just be right where we are, making the best choices that we can in the moment, and just looking for that next step, just the next step, not the whole pathway, just that next little step. And then we can boldly take that one step, right? We can take, and then we're there. And now we have a moment where we can look for that next step. It's all about presence. It's all about understanding that our circumstances do not make our lives miserable. Our thoughts and beliefs and habits about our circumstances make our lives miserable. And guess what? All of those things are with us all the time. And when we tune into those and we deal with those, now we can stay in a place where we can be at least calm. The better we get at it, we can get to peaceful. And the better we get at that, the more we're in that peaceful place. Now we're in the part of our brain that can be creative. It can problem solve. It can see opportunities that it wouldn't have seen while it was right here in blinders with the fear, right? Now that that's taken off, we can see the options and the resources we have in the now to address the problems that we were afraid were going to blow up during a time and space that we had no control over. Have you done anything like that? Have you?
Sorry, go ahead.
Do you have that experience? Has that been your experience of fear?
No, well, yes, but I usually move towards my fear, because I know that if I move towards my fear, that the end of the fear is I'll get rewarded. That's how I was be able to ask, CEO and best-selling author for their advice, or how they set their goals. But it's because the reason why I asked that is because I feel like so many of us, or my friend included, are trapped in this fear and they're afraid to get past it. That's why I wanted to help a lot of people. So that's why, but that's, oh, okay, I'll hear with that. Okay. But what are the tools that we could use to heal ourselves? Because you were because your book Fail to Win, you have tools right inside. What are the tools that we can heal ourselves?
The main tool that I wish everybody could tap into, if you got nothing else out of my book or the course or anything else we're talking about, the main tool I would impart with a magic wand into everybody's consciousness. It's not even my tool. It's a Martha Beck tool. It comes out of her books, Steering by Starlight and Finding Your Way in the Wild New World. And she talks about how she calls it the body compass. And it's really about, and it is a presence practice. It's about getting super tuned in to the guidance system we have in our body. Because our thoughts, just like we were saying, they get louder, they're on this constant noise, that it becomes this white noise. We don't even realize that these thoughts are changing our beliefs, which are changing our habits. We're not even conscious to it. So the thoughts are hard to catch. And the idea that, if you're going to do self-help stuff, it starts with policing every thought you have. You're going to catch some big ones, sure. But that reel that is constantly playing in the background, you're going to miss. So how do you find those thoughts? How do you find those beliefs that are unintentionally doing harm in your life, that are this quiet little sabotage in your life. You do that through your body. And what I encourage people to do, whether it's my book, Martha Beck's book, I'm sure she's got it somewhere on her site. I have it on my site. You can go to my site and triffanyhammond.com/Martha Beck's Body Compass. Or maybe it's just Body Compass. You'll find it. The practice then is to tap into the stories that make you feel good, tuned in sync, and find out how that shows up in your body. You do the same with the opposite kinds of stories, and you find out how those show up in your body. You get really tuned in, because what you'll find, you said something really interesting. You move toward your fear. There's two different kinds of fears, right? There's the fear that's red flag that says, oh my gosh, this is actually dangerous. Get out now, right? And then there's the fear that is, oh, I'm pushing my envelope. What are people going to think? There's this other fear that is actually trying to push us to grow. The thing is they show up very similarly in the body. So if you aren't tuned in to that subtle difference, you may just look at everything as fearful. It all might look like a red flag. It all might feel like a real threat. So when you can get really present and understand the subtleties and the way that the body is guiding you toward things that are healthy for you and guiding you away from things that are unhealthy for you, now you have a navigation system. Now there's no pros and cons in your head. There's no do's and don'ts. There's no reason to even think about what people are going to think, because you have a clear directive. Your body's saying, send that email. Your body's saying, send that. Now your limited mind, your ego mind might be going, what are they thinking? But everything else is a clear directive to do the thing you're meant to do. And the beautiful thing is the more you operate from that place, look at how present that is. There's no projection into the future for that fear at all. With practice, suddenly everybody's like, you're fearless. Oh my, you're like, no, I'm not. I just know what to pay attention to. I know where to put my energy, and I know how to use that tool. I strongly, strongly encourage people to get back in touch with their bodies, back in touch with this guidance system that helps us navigate, especially if you're trying to break through some ceiling of some kind, some sort of limitation, whether that's in your healing or if it's in your growth, because those are the times when those signals can get very easily mixed up and crossed if you haven't been present to what that means inside of you.
Okay. And you were speaking about limited mind. In your book, you also have where it's limited versus expanded, right?
Yes, expansive. Yes.
Yeah, expansive, right. Can you explain it more in depth, please?
Absolutely. So we have these two ways that we bring consciousness to our lives. One of them is very much supported by our culture, and it is that limited mind. It's not bad, it's good. It helps us understand our world. It helps us understand how to communicate. It helps us understand the difference between short and tall. But it is that bifurcation that we talked about earlier, right? It is that very culturally supported idea that if we are to fit in, if we are to succeed and excel, then we must follow these rules. That's really good at a base level, because if you're looking at, how we meet the needs we need to survive, of course we need to know how to fit in with our communities. Of course we need to know how to feed ourselves and put food on our table, or roof over our head, and all of those things. What happens is once we're stabilized in that place, though, we begin to, if we don't think of this other way that we create realities in our lives and in our minds and in ourselves and our peace of mind, we can very easily begin to look at that limited existence as the only problem to solve, as the only thing we're here to do. And the thing is there's a thing inside of everybody that gets to a point, and they've said it to themselves over and over again, there's got to be more to life than get up, go to work, earn money, pay my bills. There has got to be more to that. And guess what? There is. And the part of us that helps us tap into whatever that is, I call the expansive mind. And again, this isn't better or worse than the limited mind. These are meant to work in concert with each other. That expansive mind is creative. It has vision. It has the ability to see subtlety. It has the ability to look past someone's bad behavior and maybe see the hurt inside of them and react to something. It has the ability to forgive hurts and rather than take it personally, recognize we're all in this together. We're working. So that expansive mind is there to help take you past those lower echelons of survival into and toward self-actualization and inner peace. And when we can understand the value of each, of course, separately, but understand even more importantly how they begin to work together, we will, with practice, get better and better at answering to that expansive mind. And the interesting thing is, what happens is the more we are tuned into that, the more the limited mind problems solve themselves. Suddenly you're looking backward and you're going, I used to think all of that was stressful, and now that I'm over here dealing with this peace and this joy and this creativity and this connection with others, that other stuff that I thought was stressful is taking care of itself. So it's a much easier, much more fulfilling way to live our lives.
Wow. I was listening. I was like, whoa, really? I was like, oh wow, that's amazing. So how can what does love mean to you? Because in your book you talk about loving ourselves.
Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot here about the difference between, you know, our inner lives and our outer lives.
Right.
Mind and that expansive mind. And I look at it this way. What we do in our outer lives. Remember, this is our brain that thinks we're supposed to make things happen out here, right? What we do in our outer lives is loving. What we are in our inner lives is love. And that's completely different. The doing and the state of being are two completely different things. They're totally different from one another. They feed each other, sure, but understand the difference between making a compassionate choice, you know, where you might talk yourself into, oh, there's a sick puppy on the side of the road. Do I have time? Somebody else might get, no, okay, all right, fine, I'll go. Right? You can talk yourself into compassion. When you're in that state of love and you're in that practice of staying present, the notion to help that sick puppy on the side of the road is a no-brainer. You don't even think about it. You stop and you take care of it. And that is an act of love, not a choice to be loving. You understand the difference? Now, if we can expand that to how we deal with people and how we treat ourselves, now we're in a completely different place, right? That person who didn't hold the door open for you as you were coming in with your arms loaded, rather than see them as a completely thoughtless jerk that now everybody else, why are people so selfish these days? We create these narratives, right? Rather than see that, we now, if we're in that place of love as a state of being, we understand that they must be completely overloaded, because at the depths of them, they are love too. At the depths of themselves, they are compassion too. And in that moment, they were so overloaded with whatever was going on in their brain, they couldn't even see another human being near them. Now that's a gracious place, right? I'm not going to yell at that person. I'm not going to do anything outwardly. Also, I'm not creating a story in my head about the value of people today, right? I'm not diminishing people that haven't done any wrong to me just because this one person was overloaded and didn't hold a door open. So love to me is a state of being, and the path to love, with a capital L, state of being, the path to love is forgiveness, grace, and compassion. It is a process of unraveling those stories that we're telling ourselves about our lives, our circumstances, other people, right? When we start to unravel that and we stop assigning hurtful meaning to the interactions we have in our lives, then we're stripping away all of the layers that are covering up exactly who we are in the first place, which is love.
Love. Oh, that is so good. We're love.
We're love.
I like that. Actually, because basically, since I only have, because when I read your book, at first I only had one definition of love, but when you brought it like that, that was great. And also to talk about that, so many of us believe that, because basically in your book you also talk about burnout, right? Um, why do we believe in, like, if in order to be successful you have to be burnt out, since we live in like a male dominant society? What do you think about that?
Well, it's habitual, right? Our culture tells us that if it's not hard, it's not worth doing, and the only value is in the things that we have to really work hard for. That starts really young. If we're a child who's good at writing and we're not good at math, what does the system and our parents, well-meaning, of course, they're not setting out to diminish our gifts, well-meaning, what do? That we're bad at math, they hire us a math tutor, right? So they're right out of the gate, they're telling us that the hard work is the only worthwhile work. When what would it look like if instead of a math tutor, they said, this kid is really good at writing. Let's get them a writing tutor. Let's take what they're really good at and what makes them happy and fills them up and allow them to nurture and foster that, right? And we're constantly looking at our jobs as having to solve a problem, fill a gap, and in that thought process, of course, we have problems to solve. We can't just, Pollyanna away the things that actually do need solving. What we've done, though, is we've placed a very, very high value on what is difficult and a very, very low value on what comes easy. Even though the what comes easy is very often the thing that not only are we meant to do, but is the thing that recharges us. So imagine that writer that loves writing, that gets a writing tutor, and then writes better and better, and now that feedback, they are creating a sustainable model for themselves where they can continue to keep writing because it's feeding them as they're feeding it, right? They are not working off of this model of having to be really good at something they don't like just because it pays the bills, which that model is, as they're feeding it, there's nothing coming back and feeding them. They're running on empty. They're getting to fumes, and then they've got nothing left. And if they don't have anything left, they're not building healthy relationships. They're not taking care of themselves. They're not creating anything that is going to tap into their purpose or be used in a passionate way. They can't. They don't have the bandwidth. It's not that they should know and they don't, and so they're broken somehow. It's just not in them to even look for it. And the way we fix that for ourselves is begin to look at and value what has come easy for us. And there's a lot of negative feedback when we do that, because I'll tell you, sometimes there have been days the best thing I could do that day was not work. My head was in a tailspin. I couldn't focus. I was maybe too tired or worrying about other things. Everything I was going to create in that day, whether it's an article or a chapter or a new module for a new course or whatever, I was going to have to go back and unravel it and fix it. So when I look and I say, today is a self-care day, today is a day filled with reading, hiking, napping, maybe seeing some live music, whatever that thing is, nobody on the outside of me is going to say I worked that day. Nobody on the outside of me is going to look at that and say that day was a productive day. So we've got to give up that, or we want to give up that need for other people to understand and value the work that we're doing, right? Because when we can give that up, then we're right back into what we were talking about earlier, that presence, that level of presence. My body said I was tired. My body said I was distracted. My body said, so let's move toward what my body needs. Rest, rejuvenation. That is working. It's playing, but it's working in the grander scheme of everything I'm trying to deliver. And when I do that, where is there an opportunity for burnout? There's no chance for burnout in that space. Now, perfectly flawed over here. Perfectly flawed, because I too fall prey to the cycle of work really hard and forget that there's that need and lose presence, and I too will become burnt out. And the only thing that means is that I get to practice what I preach. The only thing that means is that I get to come back and practice patience, forgiveness, kindness, recharge, right? That's all that means. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it answered my question. Yes. It was really good. In your book, can you explain what you mean by success isn't measured by money or power or social rank? Since a lot of people always look at you, you don't have this type of material things, you're not successful. Success is measured by your discipline and inner peace. Can you explain that, please?
Again, we're facing some cultural biases here, aren't we? Because our culture wants to look at what we're producing externally as a measure of our personal value. And we've got a lot of people out there that are able to produce externally, but who find themselves in this trap of the burnout we just talked about, a place of self-loathing almost, because they can see these relationships dying off. They can see the things they said they valued now are taking a backseat. Time with their kids, time with their friends, time to write. Maybe if that was, if they were the passionate writer, they can see all of these things that they knew were a part of them begin to die off because they're not being fueled, right? We lose that opportunity to be who we are when we are so preoccupied with what we're producing that becomes the only measure of success. That person might be able to look at their bank account and say, I'm successful. And everybody around them would go, look at that guy. He's got the suit on and he's traveling all over. So that's a successful guy. And if he's not happy, if he's not in peace, if he is not in balance, if he doesn't have a good support system, if he is not part of something greater than himself, that success becomes meaningless. So then how, if that success becomes meaningless, other than to some metric that is arbitrarily assigned by society today, if that is meaningless, then how can we call that person a success? Right? If everything becomes so one-sided to that outer life, that inner life is empty, we don't have a choice but to begin to redefine what it is, not only what it is we're doing in our life, but what it is we're being with our life. That's my
being. Okay, being. Oh, that's a new way of looking at being. Because basically, so many people have this misconception of it. What is your perspective on winning? You say win is defined by what you create and give. What do you mean by that?
It's similar to the answer I just gave. Really. So we were talking about success as a person. There's another quote out there, and I'm gonna have to paraphrase it. I'm sorry, I don't know it by word for word, but it says. Passion is what we have when we have found our gift, and purpose is what we have when we give it away. And when we can begin to look at this as ourselves, as this microcosm, as this fractal piece of this greater consciousness, We begin to see that we are not just serving our own success. We're not just here to serve ourselves in especially at the level of happiness and joy and fulfillment. We tend to think of those as very solitary endeavors. And the moment we begin to see that, first of all, not true. Second of all, not powerful. And third of all, there's no purpose behind that belief. When we move that around, we begin to see that we are, the more joyful we are, the more joy we bring. The more peaceful we are, the more peace we bring. The more of these things, remember, we are love. So the more we are that, the more we radiate that out, and we give those people that safe space to maybe process their problems. We give people the opportunity to not just show up for us. We are better at showing up for ourselves now, right? We give them the opportunity to show up for themselves. And now they begin to radiate peace, joy, love, fulfillment. And we can create this ripple effect that doesn't just stop at our own well-being. When we can do that, and we can do that in communities, and then we can do that in countries, and then we can do that as a world, what is there to fight against now? There's nothing left to fight against, because everybody has got their own home within this purpose and this peace. Did I answer the question that you asked?
Yes. But you always prefer to purpose. What is your purpose? What is your purpose in life?
My purpose. This is going to sound a little counterintuitive because I'm here saying that I'm the expert and I've got the answers and I've got the book and take my class, right? I feel like my purpose has always been, it took me a while to find it. My purpose is to live so authentically in my fallibility and in my gifts that other people have the courage to do the same. My purpose is to represent everything that makes me happy so that other people can pick and choose the same things for them.
So you're saying we can choose to be happy. We don't have to be a victim.
What? You said
because I believe that because so many people are a victim of a lot of external things. I've seen it online, or whether it's online or whether it's the external or the so-called reality that we think is reality. But since but I hear that we have a choice to be happy. You agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
Why do we have why do we have a choice to be happy? Because so many of us are like taking antidepressant.
Again, this really comes back to this cultural belief that is so dominant for us, that contentment and happy are the same things, right? Because if we feel like we cannot be content until we have that next big video game or that next opportunity, and we can't be content until we have a nice boss, and we can't be content until people start treating us a certain way always and forever, and they're not allowed to be imperfect, right? If we have this idea that everything outside of us is there to serve us, we will continue to fail at happiness. We will continue to fall short of being happy. Because not only have we given away our power, but everybody else out there is doing the best that they can. And guess what? They're fallible too. They're going to get it wrong. And if we are saying you have to do this in order for me to be happy, and they're out there getting it wrong, we don't even have a shot at happiness, right? And our culture actually is supporting that idea, that our culture is actually telling us we want the bigger house, we need the bigger car, we need the better job, we need to be able to travel. And if we don't have all of those things, then there's something missing in our lives. We need to be skinnier. We need to have that happy family with the 2.5 kids, whatever narrative that we're buying into. We have this idea that our outer life is there to serve our inner life. And it doesn't work that way. It absolutely doesn't work that way. So the choice we have then is to see where we have our power. I don't have any power over you, Johnny. You were so nice. You were so nice to seek me out on Twitter. You were so nice to support me as an early adopter on YouTube and for my book, and to ask me to do the review and to ask me for this interview. You were so nice to show up to this today on time. But I had no control over that. I couldn't make you do any of that. And the moment I start thinking I'm owed that by everybody else in order for me to feel successful, in order for me to be happy, is the moment I have stopped being happy. The reason you found me, you said it earlier in this interview, you ran across one of my scopes and you liked my energy. What would my energy have been like if I wasn't moment to moment? Because sometimes there are bad days and it is genuinely a moment to moment choice. What would have happened if I wasn't doing that work, if I wasn't showing up with my energy, right? If I wasn't in that space where I had chosen happiness. Now, people are stuck in this belief system, in this communal understanding that is false. And that false is that our outer lives are supposed to serve our inner lives. Turn it around. When you start to look at what feeds your inner life, maybe you don't know what your passion is yet. That's okay. But maybe you get excited about the journey to find it. Maybe you take my course and you use those tools, and now you have a whole new idea of what's possible. You're surrounded by people who support you and are going through the same journey as you are. Now you're connected to me and my social media and people like you. Now you have access to other people who understand that happiness and that peace and that fulfillment is a choice. And when it comes first, now we project everything about who we actually are as love into the world. And now people are responding to that. They're not making judgments about us getting laid off because we probably should have been, or else if we had been, absolutely essential to the business, we would have kept our job, right? They're not going to give a crap about that judgment. If we're showing up to the world and we're saying, oh my gosh, yeah, I just got laid off and I don't even know what I'm going to do, but I'll tell you what, I am super excited to see what's coming next, because here are the things I learned about myself while I had that job. Here are the things I learned about my skill set and I can't wait to bring this to a company that's growing instead of fading. Now somebody's going to be like, ooh, I know of a company that I don't know if it's a fit. They're going to respond to that energy, right? Choice. We get to choose to come inward and work on our stuff. Remember, we talked about that path to love is forgiveness, grace, compassion. Let go of the negative stories. It's not easy. It is super important. I'll tell you this though, when you make the decision to do it, that path opens up for you. And now you can actually see happiness as a choice. When you're in the depths of depression and you're in the depths of that story and you've got it seems like the whole world is supporting that story for you, how are you ever supposed to see happiness as a choice? That you can't. Remember those blinders, right? You can't see anything outside of that one story you've told yourself. Flip it all around. Look at where you have your power. Make your choice from moment to moment. And it will not be long before you're in a situation where you can genuinely feel that you have the choice to be happy.
So you're basically saying we should live inside out instead of outside in, right?
Perfectly stated. That's exactly right. We're doing it backwards. That's all. We can fix it.
Okay. Well, that's all, folks, for today. Where can we find you, Triffany Hammond?
Well, pretty soon on Amazon, right?
Right.
TriffanyHammond.com, TRIFFANY, Hammond, HAMMOND.com is my website. Would love it if people would come and they would visit. I'm also on social media, Twitter. I do Periscopes every Wednesday. Send me your questions. I'd love to answer those. You can also check me out on YouTube at youtube.com/Triffany Hammond. And of course, I'm on Facebook as well. So lots of ways to get. If you want to be in touch with me and you haven't, there's really no excuse because I'm out there.
Yeah. Well, that's it for today. Subscribe to my channel, like my video, and share this video. And have a great day. I'll see you next time.